All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Culinary Conversations. My name is Ryan Bolheis. I'm the Culinary Operations Manager for the Downtown Market Grand Rapids. For those of you who are new to Culinary Conversations, Culinary Conversations is a collaborative effort between the Downtown Market Grand Rapids, Start Garden, Grow, and MSU Product Center. Our whole goal with Culinary Conversations is to shine a light on the West Michigan food industry, as well as help educate and support food entrepreneurs. We do this primarily through virtual events as of right now due to COVID that focus on panel discussions and guest speakers and really just help shine a light on what happens in the food industry and what's going on in our local West Michigan industries. Today's discussion is one that I'm very passionate about. It's a very important topic that I often believe is overlooked. Tonight we'll be talking about mental health in the food industry. Tonight's format will start off as a panel discussion featuring local food business owners, so we can hear some inside stories and get a great look into what it's like to not only work in the food industry, but also to be an owner in the food industry. Also joining us later this evening will be Dr. Lauren Kennedy of MSU Extensions. Dr. Kennedy will be providing us an important view of the subject matter from a mental health professional standpoint. Throughout the event, please feel free to submit questions to the speakers via the comment section on YouTube. We'll try to address as many questions as possible during a Q&A at the end of the event. With that, let's introduce tonight's panel participants. First up tonight, we are featuring Zenobia Taylor-Weiss, who is the owner of Cellar Door Preserves.
Hello.
Also joining us is Karel Shaw and Mike Wortham, owners of Street Chef Shaw. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hi, how we doing?
Next up is Chris Andrus, co-owner of Mitten Brewing Company and author of Donation, How Pizza and Small Business Can Change the World. Thank you for joining us, Chris.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's just jump right into it. So as far as the food industry goes, everyone knows, a 40-hour work week definitely is not part of our industry. Between the tough hours, the long days, the high stress, a lot of people ask the question, what drew you to the food industry? Why this industry if it's so much work?
I can start. Actually, for me, I came about it in a little bit of a roundabout way. I didn't grow up working in the food industry or restaurants or anything like I know a lot of people in the industry do. But I actually started getting really interested in food and making preserves personally when I was kind of going through my own mental health issue. I was, just having some loneliness and depression, and found that like the steadiness of chopping and having a thing to do with my hands was really healing for me. So that's kind of how I got into the food industry in the first place.
So I guess what kind of drew me into the food industry was the artistry that came with it. I've always been kind of a drawer, painter, something like that growing up, and didn't really notice that it was art to put together food, to make presentations and stuff like that. And I guess that's what kind of drew me, and to see the joy on people's faces when they receive their plate at their table was a big thing for me.
And for me, I'm fairly new to the industry myself, having been about a year since we've actually started this, under a year, excuse me. But before that, I've always wanted to be in the industry because I think cooking for me is just kind of this separation that I could add. Come home from work, busy day in the office. I come home, I can cook a meal, put some music on. It's kind of this mental break. It's this time to release everything and just create. And I've always loved doing that. And that's kind of drew me to it to do it long term.
I actually was not trying to get into the food industry. I was trying to get into the brewing industry. But on opening night, I realized I was in the food industry. And thankfully, that did work out for us. Our food has been a big part of our success, but I had to learn a lot. I didn't really have any experience whatsoever. I was a host at Big Boy and a busboy at Perkins Restaurant on Alpine, so that was about the extent of my high school summer job experience in restaurants. But I have learned to love having that food aspect. It makes, it's a great way to get people to gather in a certain place and share memories and conversation. And I'm not sure that would happen with just beer. So I'm here reluctantly, but I found a way to enjoy it.
Great. So whether it be, brewing beer, working in front of the house, working back in the kitchen. It's obviously a very physically demanding job. But beyond that, can you talk a little bit more about the mental and emotional stressors that come with the job? Chris, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I think the main thing that inflames issues, if you do have existing issues, is the pace and the long hours, And as a restaurant owner, you're never really off work. I'm in the building 40 to 50 hours a week, but your phone is blowing up all night long with problems, exclusively problems. So it's difficult to ever truly get away. The one vacation I took in 2 years, my manager quit in the middle of vacation, and I'm there on the beach trying to figure this out, calling people. And I think anybody in any sort of managerial or ownership capacity understands that it's you're always on, and it's always negative, especially if it's after hours. So I need that time to recharge away, and I so rarely get it. And that's been difficult for me, especially during COVID, to keep my issues under control. I don't have, dire, serious mental health issues, but I do have moderate issues, and I rely on that time away to get back to feeling normal, and it just doesn't exist these days, and neither does restorative sleep. And the big thing that I'm experiencing, and I feel like everyone at every level in the business feels this, is it's nothing but uncertainty. We build our lives around uncertainty. We want to know what we want to have for breakfast and what the day is going to be like, and that just is not happening. And every couple of weeks, the entire world changes. And right now, I'm hearing rumors of a shutdown coming for restaurants again, and everything we worked on building for the last couple of months is going to have to completely change if that happens. And luckily, my spirit has been broken about my dreams for 2020 enough where it's going to be okay. But I didn't realize how much we relied on that feeling of certainty to keep our mental health issues at bay, and it's all but gone this year.
Corral and Mike, how about you?
I feel like in the restaurant industry, like the stresses and pressures of just you can either make someone's day or ruin someone's day when they come into a restaurant. Whether you're front of the house, back of the house manager, or anything. If a lot of these people, they come in hangry, to say the least. They don't eat all day, and then they finally get a chance to sit down and eat. And forget their ranch. God forbid that you forget their ranch, then it might be the end of the world for them. But like that, but that stresses on your mental health because you feel like that you have failed by missing something so small to you, but it is definitely a big thing to them. You never know what kind of day that they're having as well. And that might be this one thing that kind of sends them over the edge, or gets them to retaliate towards you, or anything like that. So it all those definitely affect your everyday mental health. And like for me, when I first got into the restaurant industry, I was diagnosed with major depression disorder and anxiety before I got into the restaurant industry, not knowing how it was going to affect what I had been diagnosed with, and kind of the downward spiral that comes with it. When it's almost like Hollywood, or where it's you're surrounded by drug, sex, and alcohol at all times. Going from an employee to a manager, once again, you're surrounded by these things that can tear you down.
And then taking it from working in the industry and owning the own company is another level. And I think Chris spoke on it earlier. There is no 40 to 50 hours a week, and their phone doesn't shut off. So when this is your livelihood, when you've got kids at home, when you've got bills to pay, and everything comes from this, and you're the owner of it, and other people, you're responsible for other people and providing for their family, there's another added level of stress and pressure on you. Obviously, you want to succeed, and you want to prove to others that you can succeed, and that's always that image you want to uphold, that I'm doing great, I'm winning, I'm successful, when actually it's eating away at you, and you're this close to having a breakdown, but you want to keep pushing through because there's light at the end of the tunnel. You're trying to believe there's light, but like you said, it could be another shutdown, and that obviously adds another level of stress. So being an employee and then becoming ownership of something, the stresses are always there. You're never getting away from it, and it's tough to deal with sometimes. Each day is a new struggle, and each day is another fire you got to put out, and there's always something that has to be done, or something you got to think about or something that comes up you got to deal with.
Exactly. Sure. Zenobia?
Yeah, so I really come at this right from like a maker standpoint, and so I make a product that I put out into the world, and so and like everyone who's making food, you're making something that is going inside someone's body. Like it is like an intimate relationship, and there's a lot of like it's very I feel very honored that people like my product and want to keep buying it, but it also is, you do have that pressure of like, what if something horrible happens? What, like there's always that little thing in the back of your mind. And then, beyond those like kind of catastrophic things, it's like for me, I developed all of my recipes. I, for a very long time, was the only person at all working in my business. And so I think hiring employees was really good for my mental health. But it was also like, there is also stress there too, of like, how can I trust someone to create these recipes that I've come up with? How can I trust that someone else can do this? And then on a different note, I also just find that a little bit unconsciously, my mood and maybe mental health to some degree, but certainly my mood is pretty tied to how well I feel like my business is doing on that particular day. So if I feel like I haven't had a big sale, and it doesn't actually mean that like I actually look at the numbers and like that's what it says. It's just like if I feel like I haven't had a big sale recently, then all of a sudden I'm not in a great mood. And then a big sale comes through and then, oh, wow, everything's great. And I have all this energy now and the world is sunshine and rainbows. And so I think that is just shows you like all of that like stuff that's always going on in the back of your mind. And you have like a million checklists that you're always going through. And it's your livelihood. It's your employees' livelihood. And so there is a lot of responsibility and pressure, which is really cool, but it can take its toll as well.
Sure. Yeah. So based off of your previous experiences, both in the industry early on, as well as, starting up a business early on and starting up your own businesses as an employer, how has your previous experiences changed how you kind of approach business now? And then also how do you address the importance of mental health with your employees? Corel, why don't we start with you?
Previous experiences, they definitely have a huge impact on how you want to go about treating your employees when they do have, about some mental issues that they may carry with them. It has forced me to be more, not apologetic, but more understanding of what people's problems are. They are going to call off or can't come into work because of X, Y, or Z. You always want to leave. I feel like I always wanted to leave my door open for them to let them know that they had somebody else to talk to because, as me and Mike were talking about earlier, that like HRs are not always there to help out the employees, especially the hourly employees. A lot of the times it might be just the manager on duty. So sometimes you might need to, sit down with an employee and, give them a hug or a nice talking to or something like that. So they feel like there's somebody there that wants to actually know what's going on in their lives, I guess, and actually wants to help.
Yeah, and I mean, for us, it's starting out with 2, 3 of us, depending on who else is helping us at a day or an event. But it's still important for us to realize that, this is business and we're partners and we focus on this business. There's things going and going and going, but we need to take a minute to step back and like, how are things going personally? How are we going outside of the kitchen? Have a conversation. After Carol and I are doing something big together, we always go and have lunch or dinner and just kind of sit and talk. And it doesn't have to be about business. It's about life. And to understand where he's coming from and what's going on in his life, and he knows what's going on in my life, helps us. Obviously, that's something we're going to continue to do as we start hiring employees, to have that conversation, have the open door policy, and just know that, we are here to help. We understand it. We understand what life is like. It's not easy. Work is not your life. There's other things going on. So we need to be understanding and open to everything that people are dealing with. And that's what we kind of started doing, and that's what we'll continue to do as we hire on employees.
Sure. Chris, how about you?
Sorry, I was having some Wi-Fi issues there for a second.
No problem.
the main thing that I wanted to be as the boss was accessible, because I thought that that was missing from a lot of my previous job experience, and I overdid it, to tell you the truth. I became the negativity sponge for everything. Every problem got brought to me because I was always available to talk about it, and I didn't realize how much that was poisoning my own mindset. And I really wanted to be that person at all times for my team, and but I realized it was really hurting me. So I changed my mindset to be more consistent, to be available when I'm available, and to take better care of myself, because I really can't be of any help to them if I'm always overwhelmed.
Sure. Zenobia, I know you've recently added some employees to your roster. Same question.
Yeah. Well, first I would just say hiring employees. While I don't recommend it for people, before it's the right time, also that can be a huge help for your mental health, to have someone else or several other people taking a slice of the work pie that you have. That's given me huge improvements. Since I've hired employees, been able to get home at a somewhat reasonable hour most nights, and just know that things are taken care of and I don't have to worry about them all the time. So I would definitely recommend that to people who are at a point in their business where they're starting to consider that. But yeah, as far as my employees' mental health, we are still really shaping everything. But my hope, I strongly believe that you get and retain good people by paying them fair wages and by providing benefits. And so that is thinking about how does health or mental health in general fit into that is definitely something that is going into our strategic planning for the next year, and really thinking, what can we do? Is that provide a health stipend to the employees? Is that, I don't know. And so we're kind of still in the early stages of that, but it is something that I want to be intentional as a conversation that we're having.
Sure. Yeah. So kind of based off of everyone's response there, it's a great segue to this next question. So everybody who's been in the food or beverage industry, everyone has heard the ubiquitous saying, if you don't show up to work, you'd better be in jail or in the hospital. On the pulse of the industry, it's long hours, it's high stress. It's not one of the things in the food industry that I always laugh about is a cook's favorite bar when it's midnight and it's full at the rail. Now that coupled with that type of lifestyle, coupled with the high stressors, management causing stress, or whether it be the hours or just the constant pressure of wanting to make sure that you prove yourself, and the pride. One of the biggest things that always sticks out to me that's different in the food and beverage industry is the infamous cloak-in shifts. Getting done at 1 a.m. and then having to open again at 7 a.m. So can you talk a little bit about the culture of the food and bev industry and how you see that pertains to mental health?
I can start if you like.
Sure.
Not to make everything about COVID, but I think this is one good thing that's going to come out of COVID, is that restaurants have found their voice about speaking up against customer abuse. The customer is not always right, and in fact, they're often not right. And restaurants are being rewarded for putting people in their place. Bullies at the host stand don't want to wear a mask and all this kind of stuff. Firing the customer is something that was never acceptable in the business, but now I feel like it's in there, and if it's justified, and oftentimes it is. So we've been very vocal, and I really hope that that's something that stays around after COVID, because customers are I think Carell said it, that ranch that you forget to bring to the table, it haunts you, and any server will tell you that their server dreams haunt them. You get home, you get into bed, and you realize I didn't bring ranch to table 9, even though it's 4 hours ago. And there's a lot of it's going in that vein. There's a lot of things that have been endemic in the restaurant business, like sexism and customers harassing female servers, and female servers have gotten to be really accustomed to laughing it off while concealing some pretty serious pain. All the women that I talk to, they always have a little defense mechanism for it, or a way to shut it down before it gets too far, but it does cause serious pain. So we've been doing our best to speak up against that too, and ban customers who don't behave. And I think those are some really concrete things we can do to protect the mental health of our employees beyond, providing those benefits, which that's part of our strategic plan as well for the next year. We happen to be right next to a mental health counseling facility, and we did strike up kind of a handshake deal to see our employees for just a few dollars and barter some of what we do with what they do, and I'm hoping to develop that relationship more as we go forward.
That's awesome. Karel?
I mean, I feel like the culture of the restaurant industry is like you said, fast paced. It's hard to keep up with, and people just now getting into the industry are you're not going to understand. It's almost like a sports team. That we're all on this team together. We all have our individual events, back of the house, front of the house, dish, line, bartender, host, whatever. You have your own individual events, but we are still in this as a team, and that culture is great. But also at the same time, like you said, we all go out to the bar together at the end of the night for that break, that release. That's let's talk about table 49 today. They were crazy. About this or that. There's that camaraderie that comes with being part of a restaurant, a family that comes together. It's like a band of misfits almost, because people look down on the restaurant industry like we aren't good enough to be a banker or be somebody who sits in an office. And it's in reality we are working harder than the majority of these higher rung places people see it as. We are working a lot harder than them, and then they're not a lot of people don't see that behind the stage type of deal.
Yeah, and I have very little. I've never worked in a restaurant actually before until earlier in this year. That actually I worked with preparing food and putting food for others. And just from hearing the stories Karel been telling me for the last 15 years, it is a brotherhood. I think you mentioned that before, and it's really a time where you celebrate with each other and you're there for the downs. But in my time here that I've been able to be a part of this, the one thing I have noticed, and Chris talked about it now, is the customer does not treat the person who's serving their food very nicely. And I had experienced that many times, more than I want to count. I've had money thrown at me in the face because someone was mad because they didn't order enough tacos. And it's just, I don't understand it, how you could treat someone that way. They look down on you because they assume you're not knowledgeable in anything. They assume that you're serving tacos because you couldn't cut it somewhere else. And obviously that's not the point. And obviously that works on your mental strain. That's tough. And that's an environment that, you don't really think about if you're not working in that industry. You think about the things that you're saying to someone, how that affects you. Hearing that day in and day out is sometimes worse than what this one person's saying. It's just going to affect someone over time. And it's sad and it's troubling, and it's something that I think needs to draw the attention and needs to be changed.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, Zenobia. So as a food producer of preserves and a packaged food producer, do you feel the same way? Is it the same type of intensity for you?
No, I think I think I'm lucky to never have really worked in the food industry before. So it's not like I had bad examples set up for me to the way you're supposed to treat a staff or something. No, I mean, I really liked the sports team analogy a lot. I do feel like my kitchen crew is like that. We work really well together. And it can be intense and stressful if there's a lot of work to do, but yeah, we get along well. And then my business is also, I do a little, we do some direct to consumer, but we don't have people coming into our space. So especially with COVID and all that, we don't have to deal with that. And we're really more B2B. And so overall, I mean, there's other issues there, but nothing like this, that tends to be more professional, the space. So different issues, but I don't really run into most of those kinds of things.
Sure. So moving more towards, all of you are business owners. So what's more of a worry, the pressure of success and growth, or more the stress of underperforming as a business?
I think to me, they're kind of the same thing. So if you're not growing fast enough, you're underperforming. And anyone in the restaurant industry knows that a good year is 5% margin. So, at the end of the year, so it's really tough to find a metric for that. You always feel like you're not doing well enough, and there's never enough money in the account. We've had some great years. We've had 8 years of great experience. Not once have I looked at the bank account and thought, man, what am I going to do with all this cash? It's already spent. That's gone, I think we all have an inferiority feast or famine kind of a complex. We want to make sure that we're always thinking about the next thing and don't take anything for granted. Because there's always a slower season coming up, and for me, they're the same thing.
Sure. Zenobia?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the fear of underperforming is more motivating to me. More that like fear of success is a real thing, but that's a fear that I have gotten pretty good at facing, I think. And like just diving into and saying like, wow, that was a really huge order and I don't even know how I'm going to fill it, but I'm going to do it. And that's kind of just always been the way I've run my business, is just say yes and then figure it out. But in doing that, saying yes to an order that's 10 times bigger than you've ever had before. Well, what if something does go wrong in that? What if the quality isn't there? What if I can't make it at a deadline? What if, so I think that is one of the things that keeps me up at night more.
Sure. So, discussing mental health in the food industry, I feel Mr. have to touch base on, the likes of Amaro Cantu, Bernard Loiseau, Benoit Valdier, and of course, Anthony Bourdain, all big names in the food industry, both for their love and passion for the industry itself and for the craft, but also the tragic manner of their deaths. For me, I always kind of saw that as a classic example of the misunderstanding that the more successful you are, inherently the more stress-free you are, the happier you are. As your businesses have grown, have you found that has added to the stress, or has that relieved the stress, or did it just change in general? Kirill, would you like to start off?
Yeah, I feel like as our business grows, or as businesses grow, you definitely have added stress. I don't see any way that could relieve stress for owners or employees at all. At least my opinion on that. The stressors is always to bounce off the last question, is to keep performing. I had a schedule, or be ahead of your guest on adding to your menu, or as a manager, you're always like, okay, it's Friday, let's hit 15,000 a day. That'll be our biggest Friday that we've done yet. But you've never hit 15,000, so you don't know how to exactly perform, how to schedule, how to forecast to do those types of numbers. So that there's always that added stress of making more money. How are you going to appease the public?
Right. For us being in the infancy, it's, success 1 month looks totally different from success the next month. We've only got 6 or 7 months to go off of. So we're thinking we're having a good year, and really that could just be, we're new, so everybody loves us. And like Crow said, you want to continue to innovate and add new things. So there's that pressure of, people are catching you. We're catching the eye of so many people. They're loving you. They're calling you to do this. They're calling you to do that. And it's like, I got to perform. I got to make sure I continue to keep their attention and not underestimate or undervalue what I'm kind of providing. So there's a lot of stress once you start hitting a certain level and people start seeing you and recognizing what you're doing. You get on some people's radar. And it can be tough to keep up with that. And like you said, you always want to add new things to the menu. You always want to think about how are you going to do better on this next event, and what's it going to look like, a week from now or 2 weeks from now, because you have such a short sample time that you're like 2 or 3 weeks is a big deal how successful you're going to be. I mean, we all know about the restaurants that go under within the first year. So you're always just trying to not be one of those.
For sure. Zenobia, from a packaged food producer standpoint, same question. I'm sure you'll have a very different viewpoint on that. However, I know you've expanded quite a bit, moving into the Chicago market. Kind of speaking on what Karel and Mike spoke about, as well as expanding menu. I know you're releasing a new flavor soon. So, with your growth, have you seen more stress, less stress?
I think it's changed. I think some stresses that I used to have, I don't have anymore, because I either have figured it out or I have employees helping me with those things. So whether that's, I think my stresses used to be things like, oh, I have to make this jam this week. Someone ordered it and I'm working in the incubator kitchen. So I need to schedule out my time, and like, how does that fit in? And I had a second job and like working my calendar, and those were kind of my big stressors at the time. And those aren't really issues that I worry about anymore. But now it's like, well, how am I going to sustain sales to keep my employees employed? How am I going to grow my sales in order to grow my business? Feel like I'm running out of space at the location I'm at. Like, what does that look like? How can I pay more rent somewhere else? So I think a lot of the day to day, like minutia of stress, I don't have that as much anymore, but it's like the longer term, bigger picture stress that affects me more now, I think.
Sure. And Chris, I actually remember hanging out with Wap before you guys opened, and he actually gave some of us a tour of the space. And lo and behold, in a blink of an eye, it's 8 years later. Mitten is definitely grown to be a staple in Grand Rapids. Amazing beer, in my opinion, best pizza in GR. Just going to throw a shameless plug your way there. But after 8 years of business, how have things changed for you?
Well, thank you for that. Sorry, my boys got home from karate. I had to go. They were ringing the doorbell, so I had to run off the screen for a second. That's where I went. I don't feel any less stressed out now than I did in the beginning. I think the bigger you get, the more your vision grows beyond the people that were there in the beginning. In some ways, it was a lot easier with our original staff of 12 in one room. Before we had 2 floors and 3 locations, we pretty much knew everyone at those 12 tables. And the bigger we got, the more the culture creeps and changes, and it becomes harder to maintain, and new people interact with your company, and the more I think transactional your business becomes. It's very much relationship based in the beginning. Mm-hmm. But when a lot of new people start to come in, experience it the first time, you don't have the goodwill in the bank with these people that you have with your core customers. Same thing with new team members. You don't have that institutional memory of all the good things you did in the beginning. So you see your turnover increase, you see negative feedback increase, because like I said, you don't have that goodwill. People don't know your heart. They're there to patronize your restaurant like any other restaurant. And it doesn't matter if we're a brewery. To some people, they come in and get Diet Coke and a pizza. They don't really care so much about the brewery aspect. So the bigger you get, the less you understand the people coming through the door on any given day.
Sure.
So, in that way, it is. The stress just changes.
Sure. So speaking of people that come through the door or customers, I don't know of any chef or restaurateur or food producer or brewer that wouldn't love to use every little bit local, every little thing local. At the same time, it's difficult to get somebody to buy a $25 hamburger. So based on that, what is the role that the customer plays in all of this? How much of an effect does the guest or the customer have on mental health and the stressors of everyday life in the industry?
I can go first. I feel like the customers definitely have a huge influence. Whether it's you're a beginning company like us and they kind of push you towards what they want out of you. Like Chris said that he was trying to get into the brewery and he ended up making the best pieces in GR. So I mean, like they the customers will guide you and put you where they kind of want you, where you can build your best success. And that might not be the direction you want to go to, but maybe that's what you need to do first is find that niche. And that will have on your mental health, that will have a toll because you're not doing what you want, but you are being successful at the same time. So that's a huge thing, but eventually you will be able to get to do what you want to do and brew the type of beers you want to brew or make the type of food you want to do or be the person that you want to be. And you just have to rely on the customers to have that goodwill, good faith in you, and to keep riding with you once you provide to them what they want or what they're asking for.
Sure. Zenobia, how about you?
Well, it's really important. The customers are extremely important. So I think my customers have shaped a lot of the flavors that I've released since my initial flavor lineup of opening. Like when I first started, everyone wanted spicy jam. I didn't make any. And so started a line of that, and that has been very successful. And then the other question that I always got was, do you have anything? Sometimes people say sugar-free, which I'm like, I literally can't make a sugar-free jam because fruit has sugar, but no sugar added. So that's my newest release, the apple butter, which is no sugar added. And so that has been a long time customer request. And it's taken me a long time to figure something out that I feel really happy putting my name on. That doesn't have a lot of weird filler ingredients to give it the right consistency or something. But yeah, I would say that I pay a lot of attention to what my customers are asking for, but at the same time, I don't allow that to make me stray away from my values. So we're really committed to using Michigan fruit in our products. We believe that the whole point of preserving is like saving something that's in season in the place where you live. And so like another request I get all the time is fig jam. Fig jam is delicious. Don't get me wrong. And I like always on the hunt to find hardy Michigan figs. Apparently it might be a thing, but I have not found any yet. And so like, that's a product I just don't make. So it's like, for me, it's the balance of like, yes, I want to give the people what they want, but I also am not going to sacrifice our values and principles as a company.
Sure. So one last quick question for everyone before we turn it over to Dr. Kennedy. As far as the working in the food or the beverage industry goes, what are some of the ways that you found to be able to cope with the stress, not only of the industry itself, but also being owners in the industry? And what type of advice would you give to somebody young in the industry or a new entrepreneur who's dipping their toe in the water as far as being a business owner? Chris, why don't we start off with you?
Sure. Well, for me, Xanax and Lexapro for one. To be candid, there's a big stigma about seeking help and medication. The American myth of the entrepreneur is you have to be this unflappable, nothing gets you down, titan of industry, and you get back up if you get knocked down and all this garbage. It's tough, man. It's tough every day, and it gets tougher if you refuse help. And so I've had a dear friend and cousin took his life because he never sought the proper help, and I made a promise to myself and my family, my team, that I would seek help if I needed help. So medicine helps me. And I also take a day off in the middle of the week. Today is actually my day off. And this started as taking the day off in the summer so I could have all day with the kids and my wife could work more on that day. And I just kept it because I needed that day off in the middle of the week for my own balance. And that's when I'm at home here today. So those are two things that work really well for me. And I was like to mention that about the medication because I feel like some people may not think that someone like me takes medication, but I'm here to tell you that I do.
Zenobia, how about you?
I think a big one for me has been, I'm still not perfect at this, but has been the realization that an email can wait. You don't need to respond to every email the second that you get it. And maybe also turning off your notifications on your phone is a healthy practice. I turned off my email notifications last Christmas time when I went on vacation, and I have not turned them back on. And that has been one of the best things I've ever done for my mental health.
That sounds so scary. Turn off email.
That's my advice for everyone. Yeah, so that just taking a beat. I think for me, I started my business and it was like any email I got that was even had a whiff of a sale, I was like on it. And you kind of have to be that way a little bit when you're first starting off. But now I'm getting multiple emails a day and it's just too long. And I always go through my email and respond to them. But if I get an email at 8:00 at night, or if I get an email on a Sunday, I don't, and I have to remind myself this sometimes, but like it can wait. It can wait till Monday. It can wait till the next morning. So trying to, cultivate better habits around that kind of thing.
Sure. Krill and Mike?
I would say my advice is, we kind of touched on this already, but to kind of get rid of the stigma that it's you don't want to talk about it, you can't talk about it. It's okay to talk. It's okay to seek help. It's okay to kind of share some things with others. And on the other side of it, it's okay to ask someone how they are doing. A lot of times people just think, oh, they shut me down before, so I'm never going to ask again. And it could be a reason why they don't want to talk about it. And to continually be open and available to listen is very important. So that's a big advice I'd give to everyone. For me, I over the summer we had like a break for a few days, and my wife and I took the kids to Saugatuck and went to the shops, and I didn't realize how much of a nice getaway that was just to go to Saugatuck for the day and eat ice cream and hang on the beach. And it was such a nice mental break. So just having the little times away, even if it's just for a couple of hours. When it was warm out, I'd love to go bike riding. I could still do it. I just don't want to get cold. So trying to find something else to kind of supplement with that. But just having a mental break, something that takes my mind off so I can think about something different. It's all I need, just 30 minutes to an hour a day or a week. It used to be more than that, but now as we get busy, there's little bits of that time I have available to do it. So try to find every few minutes that I can to just set aside to myself.
Sure.
Absolutely. I feel like one thing I want to give to everybody is self-care. Whether it's going out and buying yourself something nice, going to get a pedicure, which I like to do once a month. Don't judge. I also, for me, if I have a rough Friday or have to do one of the infamous clopens, it's a rough day. I take the time to myself to read a comic book or watch a good Marvel movie, because that's what I'm into. That's self-care for me, something to, like Mike said earlier, like Zenobia pointed out, like Chris pointed out, something to take me away from everything, like turning off your notifications, spending an extra day with the wife and the family, going bike riding or whatever. It's all part of self-care. So it's all about something that helps you get you back to your mental state where you're ready to fight that depression, anxiety, or any sort of other mental issues that might come with the restaurant industry.
Sure. Yeah, all great advice, definitely. Thank you, everyone, again for participating in this panel. We'll bring everyone back at the end of the event for a guest Q&A, and we'll address all the questions that we've been getting. Up next, we'd like to introduce Dr. Kennedy, Dr. Lauren Kennedy from MSU Extensions, specialist on community behavioral health. Thank you again for joining us, Dr. Kennedy. From here, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, great. Thanks for having me. I'm going to share my screen. All right, great. Thank you. Thanks, Ryan, for inviting me to participate, to represent MSU Extension. And I just wanted to say thank you to the panelists as well for sharing all of your experiences. Ryan's asked me to talk a little bit about mental health, resources for coping with mental health issues that are found in the food industry. So first, I just wanted to start by acknowledging the experiences that the panelists have shared tonight. They've shared some, I think, really awesome solutions. And so I thought I would start by first emphasizing how stress impacts our health. And I love this image. I think it shows the wide variety of ways that stress can impact our body and ultimately our health. And we know that mental health is such a big issue across the country. And so whether that's stigma that prevents people from seeking help, it could be a shortage of mental health care providers. We see that in many areas across not just the state, but across the country. Also, our health insurance system, it makes affordable coverage and access unattainable for so many people. And then just couple all of that with the widespread stress that we see in certain industries like the food industry, and industries like agriculture, and many others. And it's particularly in industries where income is predicated on factors that lie outside of our individual control, right? So like tipped professions or service industries. And we know that, of course, the pandemic has only exacerbated the stress that's felt by those who work in those industries. So in community health, we're often examining ways to reduce existing risk factors for mental health or substance misuse behaviors. And risk factors that we might see in the food industry include things that are inherent in the industry, like we heard about already, the pace, working doubles, the stress and pressures of a service. But there's others like age. We often see mental health issues that affect those who are younger, although that doesn't necessarily exclude older adults from being at risk. We also see really in every industry, the food industry is no exception, that racism and discrimination is present. And we know that racism, the kind of everyday racism that's found in many kitchens, many dining rooms, when we mix that with racism and discrimination that's found in every other facet of life, from education to healthcare to housing, and so many other facets of life, it really creates an inequitable burden of stress for Black people and other people of color in the US. Sometimes the type of sub-industry or the setting can have an impact. The instability of a job or of income, shift availability, switching jobs frequently can contribute. And of course, as we know, the lack of affordable, accessible medical or other health benefits, including that paid leave time, are risk factors. And we want to try and reduce those or have some type of impact to cope. So the good news is that, just like I mentioned with age, the risk factors are not deterministic, right? So having a risk factor doesn't mean that you'll have an issue. It doesn't mean that it's definitely going to happen. And so there's protective factors, and we try to increase those as much as possible. And that helps to mitigate some of those risk factors. So some of these on the screen, they may seem kind of like a no-brainer, like they're very logical, but they all work to kind of create that culture where seeking help for mental health or substance use is not stigmatized. It isn't shamed, and it's seen as something that's a really wonderful, positive thing to do, that it's really that self-care. So our behaviors are the result of several different levels of influence. You can see on this ring image down here that our individual self is on that inner ring. And our behaviors can be the result of that individual knowledge that we have, the attitudes that we have around mental health and substance use, or the skills that we have. And for the food industry, there's a lot we can do at all of the levels to prevent and cope with stress or mental health issues or substance use. But at the individual and interpersonal levels, what we want to see is a big focus on education and training. So offering education to your employees on healthy stress management, providing explicit education on racism, discrimination, and equity for all staff. Those are all really important things that you can do to build that resilience, to build those peer support networks. And I'll talk more about some specific programs and tools that you can implement throughout the presentation. So the next level is organizational. And this is where leadership involvement becomes so incredibly important, because staff are always going to look to the leaders in any organization to gain that understanding of what acceptable behaviors are, what the norms are, and what the ethos is of the company and the work environment. For substance use, it's really important to have a clearly communicated and consistently enforced policy in place. It has a huge impact on the work environment. It helps with employee retention and really overall health of your employees. And so a policy in the food industry or culinary industries that strictly prohibits consumption of substances while at work or on the clock is maybe not feasible for some businesses. There might be times, obviously, when alcohol consumption is warranted, like when alcoholic drinks need to be tasted or tested before they're put on a menu. But something like eliminating a complimentary shift drink, which is a common practice, for example, that could be part of a successful substance use policy. But the most important part of the policy is that it's clearly communicated to staff and that it's really consistently enforced, so that all staff, all management, all employees are contributing to that work environment in the same way. And so again, the wider level of all of this is the community. How can we have an effect on the culture and norms of the wider community? And much of that influence could come from those inner levels, from the individual level, the interpersonal level, organizational levels. Those can all have an influence on the overall community, the culture and the norms. And I think events like tonight's event are hugely important to the community, finding those ways to share experiences with each other, to learn, and to create new norms around how to prevent and cope with stress, with mental health issues, and with substance use. It really does a lot to reduce that stigma. So I don't want to talk too much about opioids, but I think this is really important. And I wanted to let you know that there is a free naloxone tool available in Michigan. So naloxone is a medication that's administered to someone who is either having or is suspected of having an opioid overdose. And we see opioid overdoses happening more often in kitchens and food industry settings. And you might not think opioids are as commonly used in your industry as other drugs, like cocaine, for example. And you would be right, but in recent years, we've seen a huge spike in the use of fentanyl to cut batches of cocaine. And fentanyl is a really highly potent synthetic opioid. It's dangerous in extremely small doses, like the size of 2 grains of salt can be fatal. So keeping naloxone on hand could be a life-saving tool. It could for your staff or your guests. And in order to use this tool, you just have to watch a training video and then complete a short quiz, and then they mail you the kit directly to you. And if you're interested in learning more about opioid misuse prevention, treatment, or recovery, MSU Extension right now is providing virtual education across the state to anyone who's interested, groups or individuals. So you could get in touch with me if you are interested in that. Very quickly, I just wanted to highlight some other resources that could be accessed for mental health support. There are many out there that are specific to the food industry, like this Facebook group. Also, Michigan is a directory where you can access free or low-cost community-based mental health care. If you click on that link, then you can go to either the directory or they have a map where you can look up where you are, and then they have contact information that you can reach out to get that kind of care. There's also programs from across the country that can serve as a model for programming here in Michigan. And so obviously there might need to be some adaptation based on differences, in states and settings. But this program is a program that's in Sacramento. It's called I Got Your Back. And it involves training at least one staff member to kind of be that point person. They're trained as a peer counselor for the other staff. And they wear a purple hand emblem on their uniform so that the other staff can identify them. And you can learn more about this program by Googling it. Actually, I think if you're interested in doing a program like this, they're about to put all of their materials, like their training materials for their staff. All of that is about to be put online according to their website. And then you could adapt it for your local setting. And Extension also is available to help with things like that. There's also a number of other free resources available. Hashtag Free Kitchens has a mental health training video series. And resources like these, I think, they can help you, whoever you are listening as an individual, but they can be part of new hire onboarding. They can be part of ongoing staff meetings. And they're specific to the food and culinary industry settings. And so I think they can really help to be part of creating that culture and that environment to take care of yourself. There's also a lot of other small changes that can help based on your specific situation. And I think Zenobia mentioned some of those, like turning off notifications or, just checking in with yourself when you need that time away, that mental break, even if it's a small mental break. So I've mentioned this already, but it bears repeating that because of racism and discrimination, that the frequency of stress, the duration of stress exposure, and the intensity of that stress, it's not the same for all groups of Americans. And it's really important, I think, that we keep this in mind, no matter what occupation we have, because it really is our responsibility in the communities that we live and work in to understand how stress manifests so that we're not contributing to stigmatizing stress-related behavior like substance use, like mental illness, and that we're not treating them as moral failures, right? So we can all be part of developing solutions for our communities that contribute to health for all and not just for some. And I think where we work, and especially in the food industry where food is so much about community, it's just a natural place to start at work. So in that vein, I wanted to share the ideas of a Black woman named Lauren Allen. These are mostly for owners and producers, but this is how I think these ideas are really how to make changes in your work environment that will benefit your employees and your customers. And her ideas, I see them really as being able to help create an action plan to give you those concrete steps that you can take to improve the work environment so that it is more racially inclusive. And the great thing about her ideas, I think, is that when we start by addressing race and racism, it also provides that basic roadmap for inclusivity for other groups that regularly experience discrimination, whether that's based on gender or ability or disability. So the ideas here are not necessarily racially exclusive. They can be adapted to create that overall environment that's equitable. So I thought Zenobia actually had some really good points and ideas about the need to provide some type of benefits to employees, even if that doesn't look like traditional medical benefits. And hopefully owners will buy into that. But of course, those challenges that owners face to provide benefits for employees in the food and culinary industries, they're not just going to disappear, no matter how much you may want to provide that for your employees or how much you might want to even purchase it for yourselves or your families. So in that case, we really want to focus on prevention. And that's where MSU Extension can help. We offer a wide variety of prevention programs on health topics that could benefit workers in this industry. And so, for example, we have stress management programs. We have a program called Relax, which helps with managing complex emotions. We have a program called Mental Health First Aid. That's a course that teaches you how to identify, understand, and respond to signs of mental illness and substance use disorders. And it gives you the skills that you need to reach out and provide initial help and support to someone who might be developing a mental health or substance use problem, or someone who's experiencing a crisis. And we have several other programs that may be of interest. And with the pandemic, now these can all be accessed online, virtually, and the programs are free for Michigan residents. So you can go to the website and sign up as an individual. But if you wanted a closed group, we have educators that lead these types of programs in every county. So you could reach out to me or to the educator in your county, and they could work with you on setting up a closed group if you wanted to offer some type of training for your staff. So I just wanted to close by sharing my contact information and also the information for a crisis line that you could call 24/7, and also one that you could text or Facebook message 24/7 if you're not into calling. And these are not just for suicide. These numbers are for things like anxiety, for depression, dealing with a pandemic. It's really for any number of reasons related to mental health. And so as we head into the holiday season, and as we're still under restrictions from the pandemic, and as we heard maybe additional restrictions are coming, I just really urge you to be mindful of yourself and your own health and your loved ones, and please reach out if you need help. So thank you so much for having me. I'll turn it back over to Ryan now.
Ryan, you're muted.
I was muted, so that's like the anthem for 2020 virtual. My apologies. Dr. Lauren, thank you so much again, especially not only for the information, but the resources for people to reach out for help. One of the biggest takeaways that I've taken from this conversation, as well as my past experiences, that is one of the toughest things for people to do, is to have the strength to reach out and then also know where to reach out to. So thank you so much. So now we'll open it up to Q&A. We've already got quite a few great questions, so we'll just start working our way down the list. Logan G is wondering, what can the owners and operators of today do to set their employees up for success regarding mental and physical health? Is it more healthcare and mental health benefits, livable wages? This is certainly a great question for the food and bev industry, something that I think all owners and managers have been wrestling with probably since day one.
I think all of those are big issues, and all of those are going to get harder and harder to achieve in the very near term. But certainly being treated fairly is a big part of mental health. And without those three things, access to those three things, you can't help but feel unfairly treated all the time. I think understanding all three of those and finding a solution, even if they're not the Cadillac of benefits, finding an answer to those questions is an affirmation of how you feel and how you value your team members.
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely agree with Chris and saying adding value to definitely giving value to your employees is huge. Making them feel like more than just a number, just a just a regular employee, like make them feel part of a team.
Sure. Mark E asks, is there any recommendations to help managers or owners help identify staff in a crisis or who needs a break? Dr. Kennedy, I feel like that would be a great question for you. Are there any triggers that people should watch out for, especially from a management level?
Yeah, I think that a lot of times what we look for is behaviors that are different, right? So when someone doesn't act like themselves, anytime someone talks about feeling hopeless, feeling like they don't have anything to live for, those are all things that you would look for. Those are things to take seriously when we hear that from people, right? So it's not something that usually someone says if they don't mean it. That's usually like a first sign that they really want someone to reach out. They may not feel like they can reach out. So that's kind of a way, it's kind of like a passive way of trying to solicit someone to reach out to them.
Sure. Karel, Chris, or Zenobia, can you speak on that based off of this prior experience, or from a business owner standpoint?
I think there's no substitute for maintaining a culture where people feel comfortable bringing that sort of thing up and that they won't be retaliated against. And the way that I try to accomplish that at our place is through my own vulnerability and my own willingness to speak about my struggles. And I think on more than one occasion that's flushed out discussions that may not have happened without that. So that's one way the owner can be vulnerable, is to make people feel comfortable that they're not going to be the other if they bring it up, because that's a huge thing. Not everyone gives you a big flaming sign that they're in crisis. In fact, most people don't give you any sign whatsoever until it's too late.
Sure. Logan G actually has a follow-up question. They state, I do recognize that these are not immediately applicable, but what do we pick to lobby for and seek the biggest change in? That's a great question, especially with how cyclical the food industry is. There are so many moving pieces that are codependent on each other. So if there was an area to focus on, what area is that, if there is only one?
I would say mental health benefits, or just definitely lobbying to get access to it and make it easier for people to get the access to those mental health benefits. And even if it's just seeing a counselor once a month, or having those avenues open for people, maybe posted in the office or something like that, and letting them know where they can go to find help, whether it be suicide prevention, hotline, or anything along those lines.
Sure.
I would say, I think both paying a livable wage and basic health benefits are huge. And I don't want to get too political or anything, but I do think making it easier for people to, whether it's cheaper or free or something, for people to get basic health benefits also benefits small businesses and just helps everybody.
Sure. Another great question from Mark E. Do you find younger or older employees handle the stress better? That's actually a great question. Are the new wide-eyed young line cooks more at risk for handling stress in a negative way, or is it more the veteran of the industry who's been burned out for years?
I think there's probably not a binary answer to that question. I will say this about younger employees: they are much more willing to be open about their struggles. And I'm a Gen Xer. We tend to downplay our struggles, but they're much more willing to tell you if they're having a hard time and prevent that blow up. Or I think you might not know that an older employee is having a problem until they do blow up. I don't know if that helps.
Sure. Another question from Marky. Has anyone noticed more employee turnover during COVID or less? And also, has COVID increased the stress for your employees, or just added stress in a different way?
I would say that I've seen less turnover during COVID, with the uncertainty of whether we're going to stay open or not, or people are definitely want to stick with where they're at, and they don't necessarily want to change jobs and learn a whole new menu and maybe not get put on the schedule because you are brand new. And a lot of the employers definitely go by a hierarchy of who's been here the longest, veterans, obviously get their hours first. So I think there's less of a turnover during COVID for sure.
Sure. Dr. Kennedy, what can somebody new to the industry, how can they set themselves up for success before, while they're still early on, before they reach that point, that breaking point, or that high stress point? How can somebody who's a little bit younger or new to the industry just prepare themselves best?
I think it's really about that self-care that everyone's been talking about, trying to find those moments where, you have that break, where you're away from it and you can think about other things. You can enjoy your life outside of work. I think when you're working at the pace that a lot of people are when they're young, and when you're working doubles, so many days a week, that can be hard. So I think it's really about making sure that you take that time for yourself and not kind of really get overwhelmed with everything to the point where you feel like you can't reach out, or you feel so overwhelmed with that stress that you use the more unhealthy coping mechanisms like substance use and things like that.
Sure. So we'll do one more quick question for everyone. What in the industry, what would you like to see from the industry itself moving forward to better, quality of life for everybody on the whole gamut, business owners, to employees, to farmers, everybody in the food industry or food and beverage industry and everything related to it. Chris, why don't we start with you?
I feel that the biggest looming issue is still the way that customers treat food service employees as subordinate or as less than. I think that's the single biggest influence. I think one thing that COVID has taught us is that the food industry is absolutely essential. People were cooking for themselves for a couple weeks, and then they started going back out and ordering takeout because it was such a comfort they were used to that they didn't realize how much they would miss. You don't think of food service as being essential, but it absolutely is. And food service workers from all over the city stepped up and gave away food and delivered groceries to people and did any myriad of things that proved that they were essential. But I feel that the customer treatment is the biggest looming issue. We have to change the expectation of what that looks like. And just because you serve someone for a living doesn't mean that you're subject to every whim that they have.
Perel, how about you?
I think Chris pretty much nailed it on the head with the customer interaction, definitely. Other thing I would possibly think of is the culture inside the restaurants. A lot of the restaurants, we have to learn to work together as a team and as a family. And when I mean work together, it's not just on the busy Friday nights, busy Saturday nights, but to help out the team and talk to them about any mental issues they might be having, or helping cover shifts, or just being there for people. That culture needs to change because there's a lot of restaurants where that culture is not cultivated yet, and it's not built around being a family, which like people don't understand. It's a band of misfits that nobody really yet understands.
Sure. Zenobia, how about you?
In my dream world, people would have more of a understanding and recognition of the true cost of food. I think we've gotten really used to really inexpensive food that it should never have been this inexpensive. And so, like, for example, I sell my jam for $12 a jar, and that's because I buy fruit from farmers who are good to the land and good to their employees, and I'm good to my employees, and I really believe in that. And so I'm not saying everyone needs to buy $12 a jar jam, but like when you buy a $3 jar of jam, like, I get it, but like, where did that fruit come from? Who picked the fruit? What were the conditions in the factory where they made that? So like a little recognition of food is more expensive than we've been paying for it for a long, long time.
Definitely, sure. Dr. Kennedy, any final words or anything that you would like to see change from the industry?
From a public health perspective, I think that what we really push for, and really in any industry, is the adoption of that prevention perspective, right? So I think all of the panelists, all of the ideas that they just said that they would like to see are part of that prevention perspective. So, making the environment one where people feel like they can talk, where that stigma isn't there, where the customer, understands the product, like Zenobia talked about. I mean, those are all, I think, part of adopting that prevention perspective.
Well, again, our panelist, Dr. Kennedy, thank you so much for taking the time tonight. Again, this is a subject matter that's very near and dear to my heart. So for all of you to share your stories, your advice, your input, it really does mean a lot to me that we can spread the word of this out there. And again, thank you so much. Everybody out there, thank you for joining us. Stay tuned, ear to the ground for our next Culinary Conversations event. And we hope to see you all again soon. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, guys.